So thank you so much for coming on, Mitchell. I really appreciate it. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do, who you are?
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for having me. So I am the director of marketing at Crash, and what we're doing, we're building a career launch platform to help people kind of signal their value to the world, become their own credential. So I'm excited to be here, and glad you sent the invite.
Awesome. So what's one thing you do every day that makes you more valuable?
Man, one thing every day. So one of my favorite things is to just kind of follow a streak, to get into a streak of doing something consistently every day. It's not always the same thing, but when you're kind of in a rhythm, it's easy to sit down and do that one thing. And the easier it gets easier over time, but the sooner you do it in the day, the better. So for instance, one of the things that I try to do every day, whether I'm actually publishing or not, is actually set aside time to write. I think publishing is really important. That idea of learning out loud and putting your ideas out into the world for the scrutiny of others. And doing that every day is really valuable, but sometimes I take a step back and do it just for myself. I just finished sort of a 50-day streak of writing a blog post and a quota answer every day, for instance. And it was really, really valuable. It wasn't one of those things where it's like where I sat down and got writer's block. It became much more a process of, all right, I sat down, my body is now kind of in the mode to write and focus on that. And that's like one small tangible example, but that kind of applies to so many different elements of your life. While the streak is good, just follow it. But also the flip side of that is it's important to create your own momentum as well. There are going to be days where you don't want to do something, but it's maybe more important on those days to, all the more important to sit down and cross something off your list. That'll make the next day easier, and it'll make the next day that it's hard to say no, to actually sit down and do it. So don't ever undervalue the value of momentum.
Yeah, yeah. So it sounds like you've done quite a few different, had a few different streaks going, and kind of have experience just with starting a streak and keeping it alive. What do you do to help yourself keep a streak going and gain that momentum?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple things. The maybe one of the first things I would say is make it as easy on yourself as possible. So we'll continue on the example of writing. This is an easy one. Anybody can do it. But if you know that that's your goal to do something every day is to sit down and write, don't wait until you have 30 minutes left in the day and give yourself an unnecessary amount of stress. Another good tangent of that as well is like set a finite amount of time for something. That makes it a lot easier on yourself as well. That it's a practice that, I did an exercise like that for 30 days recently. Is I put 10 minutes literally on a stopwatch, set it and wrote for 10 minutes, whatever I had at the end, I was done and hit publish. And again, that the point of that exercise was maybe not write really valuable content. It was more of train myself to do something in a finite amount of time. And that makes it a lot easier when you start to think about, creating good habits and following through with them, is sticking to, that set amount of time. Another good example is like the same thing, like going to the gym, or whether you want to meditate or something like that. Go and put the amount of time that you want to devote to that on your calendar each day. Set it up as a recurrent event. And during that amount of time, that window of time, like that's what you're going to do. And if you feel like there are going to be people in your life that are going to, maybe tempt you to break that, like let it be known that it's a priority to you. And you may get crap from other people for a while, but after you start to kind of, you start to build a trend line of a certain type of behavior, other people take notice, and they start to respect that. It gets a whole lot easier when you're like, this is my writing time. Maybe something people laugh at when you're on like day 5, but when you're on day 500, people are like, okay, yep, that's sacred. I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to interrupt. So make it as easy as possible for yourself, and, stick to your finite window of time.
Yeah, great tips. So how long have you been keeping streaks for? Like, in general, was there a point of time where you decided, in order to get stuff done, I just need to make it a streak?
Yeah. So I won't say that like I'm on some kind of unbroken streak for any point in my life or whatever, but it's much more about, um, I tend to think that when you decide to go a certain direction, there are certain behaviors that help you get there. And sometimes that's a little bit harder to make a list of, I need to do X, Y, and Z. What is really easy though is to make a list of things you shouldn't do and avoid those. Like if you're gonna write, sit down and write. Don't go pace around the kitchen or procrastinate or whatever. But that's kind of the underlying foundation of the idea of keeping momentum, is that when you want to get somewhere, you got to start going. You got to start putting one foot in front of the other, and you get closer every step. And that sounds really cliche, but it's just the it's just the truth. You can't get there by I guess deviating from that plan. And the other thing is, it's one of my favorite like old adage Chinese proverbs is like, what's the best way to eat an elephant? It's like one bite at a time. It makes it a whole lot easier, particularly if you have some kind of big grand vision, to break it down into much more tangible step by step. What's one small thing I can do today to get closer to that? And when you have this big, hairy, audacious goal, it's kind of disheartening some days. You're like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to succeed. And especially if it's something that you have some kind of feedback loop on, where you can see your actual progress toward it. If progress starts to look slow, it becomes really disheartening over time to feel like you've put your heart and soul and energy into it, and you don't see that tangible result. So breaking it down into much smaller bite-sized pieces, and then just trying to make progress every single day, whether it's big or small. Just like cross one thing off the list, you're going to get closer and you're going to feel better over time. So that's kind of the idea.
That's fantastic. That's like the entire idea I'm trying to get out through this whole project. So where can people find you if they want to find out more about what you're doing?
Yeah, great question. So I blog pretty frequently on my own personal website, mitchellearl.com, and then probably most active on Quora. Again, Mitchell Earl is the handle on that. And then always feel free to go check us out at crash.co and what we're doing there, helping people launch their careers. So
cool stuff. Thank you so much for coming on today, Mitchell.
Yeah, been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome.